He turned down the chance to take his show to a bigger city, and that choice brought an entire dying town back to life. His name is Ben Napier, and before he became the face of one of HGTV's most watched renovation shows, he was a woodworker in a small Mississippi town that most people had never heard of. By the time this story is done, you'll understand exactly why the decision he made in a network conference room was the most important one of his life. Ben Napier did not grow up dreaming about television. He grew up in Laurel, Mississippi, a town of around 18,000 people in the southern part of the state, the kind of place where everyone knows your family name and your grandfather's reputation follows you to the hardware store. Ben was 6'6", built like a defensive end, and he played college football at the University of Mississippi. He studied history at Ole Miss, not film, not business, history. After college, he didn't chase a career in sports or media. He went back to his roots, almost literally. He started working with his hands. Custom wood signs, furniture, leather goods. He built a small operation called Laurel Mercantile Co., selling locally, taking commissions, doing the kind of work that doesn't make you famous but keeps you connected to something real. That was the life he wanted. Quiet, craft-based, grounded in a place, and then HGTV called. And if you think that phone call made everything simple, stay with me because this next part is why the whole story matters. The show that became Hometown wasn't built on a Hollywood pitch. It was built on a house. Ben and his wife Erin, they met at Ole Miss, married in 2008, and had already been pouring everything they had into Laurel, were renovating homes in their community before any camera crew showed up. Erin was a designer. Ben was the builder. Together they had a clear vision. Take neglected houses in a struggling town and turn them into something people would want to live in. HGTV saw the footage and saw a show. Hometown premiered in January 2016. The premise was specific. Laurel, Mississippi, not a suburb of Nashville, not a renovated neighborhood in Austin or Charlotte, a real small southern town with boarded-up storefronts, a declining tax base, and a population that had been watching people leave for decades. For a show like that to work, the location isn't just a backdrop, it's the whole argument. And what happened the moment the show started gaining viewers is the part the production deals never fully accounted for. But here's the part that changes everything about what you just heard. Networks don't stay quiet when a show starts working. Hometown worked. The ratings were strong. The audience responded to something that felt genuinely different. A couple who seemed to actually like each other, in a town that felt like a real place, doing work that wasn't just cosmetic. By the second and third seasons, HGTV had a hit on its hands, and where there's a hit, there are conversations about how to make it bigger. The conversations, according to multiple reports, included the idea of expanding the show's footprint, moving operations, taking the Napier brand to a larger market, one with more inventory, more visibility, more of the things that networks use to justify bigger budgets. Ben and Erin said no. Not a complicated no. Not a negotiated no with conditions attached. A foundational refusal based on something that most people in that position don't have the leverage or the nerve to say out loud. This show is about this place, and if you move the place, you lose the show. What happened next is the reason this story spread across the internet. Laurel, Mississippi started changing. Not because of a government grant, not because a corporation chose it for a new headquarters, because people who watched Hometown started showing up. Tourism in Laurel increased dramatically after the show aired. Local businesses that had been hanging on reported foot traffic they hadn't seen in years. Restaurants, boutiques, shops that had been invisible to the outside world suddenly had customers driving hours to find them. The show hadn't just made Ben and Erin recognizable. It had functionally marketed a town that had no marketing budget. None of that happens if the Napiers relocate. The entire economic chain, the tourism, the visibility, the revival of a community that had been contracting for a generation, runs directly through the decision to stay. Ben never framed it as heroism. In interviews, he talked about it the way you'd expect from someone who actually grew up somewhere. This is where we're from. This is where our people are. Why would we leave? Most people in her position would have walked away. What he did instead is the part nobody talks about. The business side of that decision is worth understanding. Ben didn't just keep his family in Laurel. He built his brand there. Scotsman Co., his wood and leather goods line, grew directly out of the show's platform. Products that might have stayed local became nationally recognized. He was selling craftsmanship from a Mississippi workshop to customers across the country who found him through a TV show about a Mississippi town. That's not an accident. That's what happens when the story and the place stay aligned. The authenticity that made Hometown watchable was the same authenticity that made Scotsman Co. credible. You can't manufacture that by relocating to a trendier zip code. In 2021, People magazine named Ben one of their sexiest men alive. He and Aaron publicly laughed about it, which is exactly the kind of reaction that tells you who someone is. One phone call, one conversation, that's all it took to change the direction of everything. Hometown Takeover proved the model could scale, without Ben and Aaron moving. In 2021, HGTV launched a spin-off that sent the couple to Wetumpka, Alabama, to renovate an entire small town in a single season. The concept worked not in spite of the Laurel model, but because of it. They had demonstrated something the network hadn't originally planned for, that a show rooted in a specific place with specific people could become a template, not a limitation. The key was that Wetumpka was a project. Laurel was still home. They came back. Ben and Aaron now have 2 daughters. The family still lives in Laurel. The show is still filming. The woodworking shop is still operating. And the town that network executives may have seen as a liability when the show first pitched has become one of the most recognizable small towns in American television. That doesn't happen without the refusal, without the conversation where someone with a platform said, "The place is not negotiable." And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. The real thing Ben Napier protected wasn't the show. It was the conditions that made the show possible. A marriage that functions because it's not performing for a city that demands performance. Kids who grow up knowing the same streets their parents grew up knowing. A craft business that makes sense because it's embedded in the community it serves. A show that rings true to millions of viewers because it actually is true. Hollywood's version of the Ben Napier story would have had him in a bigger house, in a bigger market, with a bigger production deal, and a lifestyle brand built for a different audience entirely. That version probably exists somewhere, as a pitch that never got made. The version that actually happened is a 6'6" woodworker who stayed put and watched his town come back to life. Sometimes the most consequential decision a person makes is the one that looks like saying nothing, just holding a line that everyone around you is telling you to move. Ben Napier built something lasting precisely because he refused to let success talk him out of the life that made success possible. Hometown continues on HGTV, and Laurel, Mississippi continues to draw visitors who come because of a television show and stay because the town turned out to be real. Scotsman Co. is still running. The Napiers are still there. The question worth thinking about is this: if you had a platform that gave you the option to go anywhere, would you have had the nerve to stay where you started? Or would the bigger offer have been too loud to ignore? Tell me below.